The battle's over, but the war over Gaza goes on. Outbreaks of violence have strained an already shaky ceasefire. And while Israel's defense ministers denied any plans for a second war, his prime minister's talking about harsh and disproportionate responses. Election stunts, an undermining of the truce process, or just a sign of things to come? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. February 5th and February 10th. Two dates, neither of them far away, and ones which will shape the immediate future of Gaza, Israel, and any hope for peace between the two. The 5th is when a more lasting ceasefire deal is supposed to be reached. The 10th is when Israel goes to the polls. But what does it all mean when both sides have started fighting again? At least a dozen rockets and mortar shells have been fired from the Gaza Strip since Sunday, as ever landing in southern Israel. Interestingly, it was a faction loosely linked to the Palestinian president's Fatah movement, which admitted firing two of the rockets. Hamas hasn't taken responsibility for the new attacks, but Israel holds Hamas responsible given it's ruled Gaza since seizing power in June of 2007. And Israeli retaliation is intensifying with brief ground incursions and bombing aimed at rocket launchers and smuggling tunnels. And all the while, efforts to hammer out a permanent ceasefire are ongoing in Egypt. But a deadline is approaching there, February 5th, as we said, and it'll be no easy task when you consider what each side wants. A reminder now just of what Israel's offer is on the table. It's proposing 18 months of total calm, with the Gaza crossings to remain open as long as the Palestinians uphold the terms of that calm. The Rafah crossing would remain, however, as it is, under joint Israeli-Egyptian control. There's also an Israeli promise to consider international monitoring troops in the future. Hamas, though, is talking more about demands than offers. It wants a year-long ceasefire, 6 months less than Israel says, and specifically an end to all Israeli aggression. It wants the siege ended and all Gaza crossings opened, and for Israel to have nothing to do with the Rafah crossing. But Hamas has accepted the idea of an independent body to oversee reconstruction efforts, including the money which goes with them. Let's bring in our guests at this point. In Jerusalem is Dr. Shmuel Sandler. He is the Senior Lecturer of Political Science at Bar-Ilan University. In Beirut is Alistair Crook, the Director and Founder of the Conflicts Forum. And in Ramallah in the West Bank, Mustafa Barghouti, the President of the Palestinian National Initiative, a political movement that advocates Palestinian unity. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on Inside Story. Alistair Crook in Beirut, let me come to you first. When we look at the various demands and offers which are on the table between Israel and Hamas, is there, do you think, any potential for compromise on either side?
There's the potential for compromise, but will it be realized is a different issue. I think, in fact, it's even more complex than the introduction has suggested, in that there are other elements that Egypt and Israel is trying to hold the openings hostage to a deal on Gilad Shalit, the Israeli soldier held by Hamas in Gaza, that the crossings will not be opened until he is released. It's also trying to hold it hostage, if you like, to a reconciliation with Abu Mazen, which at this moment is not looking very, very promising. And it is also trying to tie it to some agreement that the ceasefire will be a longer one than a year and a half. In fact, it'll be automatically renewed, which actually means an end of resistance. And I think all Palestinian groups are having problems with some of these demands. So my expectations are not high that there will be a resolution. But is there the potential? Certainly. The potential is open the crossings, and I think all of the resistance group in Gaza will agree to bring an end to the rocket fire. That's the basic core of a deal.
OK, so that's an important part, obviously, the crossings. Let's talk to Dr. Sandler in Jerusalem about that. Obviously, as Alistair Crook was saying, that the crossings could actually be the key to this whole thing. Again, I'll ask the same sort of question to you. Is there room for compromise there, perhaps, from the Israeli side, as far as control of the crossings, opening of the crossings, monitoring of the crossings?
Well, first of all, the crossings are, as far as humanitarian aid, are open. What Israel says, it will not open all the crossings totally until there is a deal about Gilad Shalit. But some of them can be open, if a ceasefire is announced,
So Gilad Shalit
agreed upon.
Gilad Shalit is perhaps the key to this whole thing then?
I don't know if he's the key. I think at this point the key is really an agreement of ceasefire that will be kept by both sides and no return to the previous regime where Hamas was shooting every day at Israeli towns. I mean, no sovereign state can agree that its towns should be attacked, whether it's even if sometimes it doesn't hurt anybody, but still you cannot be attacked. But many of the times people were hurt, and no sovereign state can agree to that. So this is the basics. And of course, we are not going to agree to the fact that a soldier of ours will be kept there forever. I mean, he must be returned, and this is part of the agreement. We have an asset, and we're going to take care of it, just like they have an asset, and this will be the deal.
Dr. Mustafa Barghouti over in Ramallah in the West Bank. I realise that is where you are. You're not actually in Gaza, but I'm sure you've got an opinion. I've been talking about compromise and flexibility. What do you think? Do you think there is room for Hamas flexibility? Because I might think sometimes that, and I've certainly heard this said, that if there was more flexibility on Hamas's part, then perhaps they wouldn't be in the line of fire so much more.
I've just come back from Gaza after spending a whole week there, and the devastation I've seen there is just unprecedented. I don't know how to describe this inhumanity, but I can tell you that the Israeli army conducted sadistic war crimes against innocent human beings. The main people who suffer from this war was the Palestinian civilians, children, women. One thing that the Israeli army did before they left Gaza was to completely destroy the whole private sector. 351 factories and a huge number of farms for no reason. These things were destroyed when the army was leaving, and it is clear that Israel is creating a buffer zone with a depth of 500 meters to 1,000 meters inside Gaza Strip, where anybody who happened to be there will be shot at and killed, like has happened to a farmer there.
So shouldn't
Since
all of that...
the war was...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Shouldn't all of that stuff that you've seen and you've described, not to trivialise any of it whatsoever, but all that is around the people, shouldn't that make the people there, Hamas, the people who are dealing, look at it and think, we have to change, something has to change here, Israel has to change, but perhaps we have to change as well when it comes to this ceasefire?
Well, of course, but the people are ready for ceasefire. I think the war never stopped. Israel has violated its own ceasefire that was declared up till this moment more than 20 times. Today they bombarded Gaza with F-16 jet fighters and with Israeli planes. Of course, there were some missiles shot at Israel, but all these missiles happened after Israel broke the ceasefire itself. They have.
I'm sorry. This is not correct. This is not.
They shot. Let me please finish. I didn't interrupt you, sir. They shot at fishermen from boats on the second day of the declaration of the ceasefire. And the other very important point is that Israel is still putting Gaza under siege. Israel, you know, I was in Gaza. I stayed in a room which did not have glasses on the windows. Almost every window in Gaza is shattered. Israel does not allow a single piece of glass to enter Gaza. They are not allowing anything to enter Gaza to reconstruct or at least repair some of the damage, where 6,000 houses have been completely demolished, and I've seen them myself, and more than 20,000 other houses were partially damaged. This is inhuman. What is happening in Gaza? They only allow food and nothing more. And in my opinion, there can be ceasefire, and the ceasefire can be for 1 year or 1.5 years, it doesn't matter, but it has to be accompanied with complete lifting of the siege that is inhuman, unacceptable, because it represents collective punishment against people who were brutally killed and injured during the course of a whole month.
Okay, Dr. Sandler, go ahead, just before I go back to Alistair Crook.
Yeah. No, I mean, I thought we were going here into an interesting discussion. I don't understand. You're talking propaganda, Mr. Barghouti. This is not the question. The question is whether...
It's propaganda when you cannot prove your arguments, yes.
Of course, was there an argument? There's no argument. I mean, would any country, Arab country, agree that its borders, its town should be shot at, be bombarded? I mean, was a reason for our operation.
So why do you occupy
the
us?
reason
Do
that
you,
our-
does
they're in
any
the-
country...
But Gaza,
Why do you
Gaza is
occupy
not
us in the West
occupied. I'm
Bank?
sorry, we gave back every inch there. It's all
And what are
under
you doing
not
now
your
in
control.
Gaza,
That's your
bombarding
problem.
it?
You gave it to Hamas. You gave it to Hamas.
Okay,
and you lost it to Hamas.
Gentlemen,
And you're going to
I'm
give
going to jump
Israel
in
to
just now.
Lieberman?
I'm just going to jump in now because I'd like to bring the conversation back if I can.
Yes.
I realise you've got all very good points to make. I'd like to bring Alistair Crook back in, actually, who's been waiting over in Beirut, with another point that we made in the lead-up, the talk about reconstruction money. Hamas talking about an idea of an independent body to oversee the money because, as we know, it's accused the PA and Fatah of being corrupt with money in the past. I mean, again, it's as Mustafa Barghouti was talking about, there's a problem on the ground now about the devastation there, which needs to be addressed. Is it going to be, do you think, is that money going to make it through properly?
It certainly needs to get through properly. But I think there are a number of problems here. And the least of them is the problem about an independent body to oversee the reconstruction. In fact, this is what Hamas has proposed, that there should be an independent body. They have to be a part of it, if you like, but they are accepting and proposing that there should be some independent transparency and accountability function exercised perhaps by the World Bank or by a firm of accountants or something like that to make sure that money is spent as it is intended. So I think that is not the problem. The problem is that certainly at the early stage, Egypt was trying to tie any passage of reconstruction money that it must only pass through Ramallah and through the Palestinian Authority of President Abbas. And that has been unacceptable to everyone in Gaza, largely, at this point. And then finally, I think there is the problem is essentially, well, what is Israel going to allow in? Is it going to allow in school materials? Is it going to allow in building materials? Or is it simply going to allow in the minimum number of calories to sustain life in a completely devastated Gaza? And those are the issues that we are still not clear whether they're going to be resolved or not. And at the moment, it's looking, certainly up until the election, as if Israel is going to keep the taps closed and just simply allow the minimum through to sustain life, rather than to reconstruct Gaza in the meaning that we all understand, which is a return to normal life of the people who live in Gaza.
And rather conveniently, Alistair Crook mentions the election there. That's what we're going to talk about after the break. We'll expand our discussion, look at how the Gaza war and its aftermath are giving a bigger lift to Israel's right than to those in power. We're back in a moment.